Vikings were one of the most surprising teams in 2024. With no Sam Darnold, will JJ McCarthy be able to lead them back to the playoffs? We discuss their chances on today's episode.
Yeah, I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Okay. Hey. Yeah. Ain't no errors, baby, it's a new era. I wake up early feeling rich like I'm Kesha.
Welcome in another episode of Sounds Gouda. Thank you everybody for coming back and taking a listen to us. I am one of your two co-hosts. My name is Rob Ralph. Next to me is my best friend, as always, Jordan Olson. We are trying to still hit 600 subscribers. So if you are on YouTube or you've been listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to swing on over and help us out. It would greatly help out the show. Know that we do have new content every Wednesday and Saturday, again, on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So just know that that is where we will be. But like I alluded to in the beginning, we're going to be deep diving on our favorite rivals, the Minnesota Vikings. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into them. They obviously had a really good year last year. And let's just start with that, Jordan. I remember talking about them from last year, not thinking that they would have a stellar year, getting over Sam Darnold, not knowing what he was going to bring to that team. But man, were we wrong, along with a lot of other folks, right? Ended up getting to 14 wins, had a really good year, but did end up losing to the Los Angeles Rams in the playoffs. But still a fantastic year for the Minnesota Vikings. Do you think that they can repeat that success for this year?
Well, that's a great question. We certainly were surprised by what happened last year. We couldn't account for the Sam Darnold of it all, right? Like, I don't think anybody expected that. And if anybody told you they did, they were probably full of shit, to be honest. But, and we'll see how Sam Darnold does with the Seahawks this coming year. But, they're going to transition to JJ McCarthy. He's going to get his shot as a starter. And anytime you have a first-year starting quarterback, and he's not a rookie anymore, but he might as well be, but he's been around the system. He should understand the playbook better than he would have a year ago. And they do seem to have QB whisperer / I think he's one of the best play callers in the NFL too, and Kevin O'Connell. So, a long way of saying, do I think they're going to get to 14 wins again? No. Do I think they're going to be a playoff team? I don't know. Are they going to fight? Are they going to have less wins than last season? I would say absolutely, if I had to put my money on it right now. And, we're going to go through the schedule later. We're going to give our predictions. Vegas has knocked them down quite a bit from their projection or their win total last year. They're over and under right now is 8.5 wins. So clearly they think that they're going to take a big step back. So, and, they have one of the oldest, if not the oldest, rosters in the NFL. So, you have to wonder how much, some of that continue, and like the ageless wonders of Harrison Smith, how many more years can guys like that get it done? So,
yeah, I 8.5, I think seems pretty appropriate to me, like my general just gut feeling on that. Just knowing what the rest of the NFC North has to go through and playing that gauntlet schedule. It seems to me, it feels like an under, but then I'm kind of really discrediting Kevin O'Connell and how great of a coach he is. He really is one of the best coaches in the NFL, in my opinion. Not only that, but Flores, their defensive coordinator, who was again getting some head coaching vacancy run this last year. He was already the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Anyway, he's a really good defensive coordinator. They have a really good defense, right? A lot of ageless wonders over there too. They had some really good signings as far as their offensive line, and we'll get into that a little bit as well. So really, they got good wide receivers, right? And good running back, right? Our favorite beloved person in Aaron Jones. So really, I mean, if you listen to us at all, or maybe if you haven't, I think obviously the biggest question mark for them is just what is JJ McCarthy going to be this year, and what kind of magic can Kevin O'Connell do with him?
You bring up a really good point, and I won't take up too much airtime here, but Brian Flores is just a phenomenal coach, right? And at some point, I don't know what the deal was in Miami. He got a bad rap there with Tua or whatever, but like, he's the straw that stirs that drink and just maximizes this defensive talent that they have, whether it's old or new or influx. I mean, some of the players they added last year, like Jonathan Grenard and Van Ginkel, obviously were big hits. So, he seemingly can make the most out of any anybody that joins that side of the ball. So that's also what makes me really worried about that like 8.5 number and so hard to predict is I think he can get a lot out of those guys. But when you do talk about the free agents that they either retained or signed, Rob, who stands out to you the most? Where did the Vikings add to this team? Where did they lose? I mean, where does that roster stand right now?
Well, Harrison Smith, the ageless wonder. You talked about him, but man, he's going to age 36. He's old as dirt in NFL terms. So obviously, he just continues to be a really good player for them and a stalwart there on that back end for them. Aaron Jones, for sure, no doubt. He's back again. Our linebacker, Eric Wilson, coming back over. Obviously, they re-signed and gave a hefty contract to Byron Murphy Jr. So I think probably overpaid for him a little bit as well, but he had such a good year last year that I'm not surprised on that. And then the other really kind of key ones that I thought were kind of sneaky but really good moves. Obviously, the Jonathan Allen one coming over from the Commanders. We'll have to see what he ends up having. And then center Ryan Kelly and guard Will Freeze, two couple really good sneaky moves for that offensive line for them. So those are the ones that stood out to me.
Yeah, we had questions about the Vikings offensive line. It ended up being a pretty solid unit last year. Despite injury, I know that Cab Robinson was traded for, and now as a member of the Houston Texans, he kind of came and kept that line moving in the right direction. Yeah, they brought him in to replace Christian Darrisaw, and he's going to be back. So I think they feel pretty good about their bookends. But you're right, like Ryan Kelly has been a long-time starter. They basically just took the Colts interior line and they said, come over to Minnesota and play in another dome environment.
Yeah.
But Ryan Kelly was a long-time starter there. Will Freeze was a multi-year starter there. Those are good picks to strengthen that unit. Seemingly all of the offensive lines in the NFC North seem to have been built up and gotten stronger this year. And we'll see how that plays out. Just kind of note, they did have a lot of changeover. And I think I said that last year about them. And I'm like, with all that change, it's going to be hard for them to gel. But, some other guys they did sign, Rondale Moore, Jeff Okudah, Isaiah Rodgers, Justin, I think it's Sukal. He's a swing tackle from the Buccaneers that's played there as their swing tackle for the last couple years, has some starts. So that's a good depth move for them. Bubba Bolden, Theo Jackson. So, more and more changeover on that roster to try to keep things floating. A couple notable trades. So they did bring in Jordan Mason. I think they traded some draft picks to acquire him from the Flyers. And he obviously, he's been pretty good in his career in the time that he's gotten, to run the ball with the Niners. So now he becomes the 1-2 punch with Aaron Jones. So, they probably feel pretty good about their running back room at this point in time. Also traded for another interior offensive lineman, Ed Ingram from the Texans. So I'll let you talk about their draft picks, but they didn't have a lot of draft picks, which personally I think is a terrible combination, being the oldest team in the NFL and then I think they only started the draft with 4 picks and ended up with 5. But what did you think about the guys they ended up taking in this year's draft, Rob?
Yeah, they, continue to do what I think is really smart and put a lot of draft and free agency capital and signings on the offensive line, which is exactly what you want for, I know it'll be McCarthy's, second year, basically redshirted his first, but he got injured. So this will be technically his rookie year. They want to keep him upright. And the more time you give a rookie quarterback to, learn the defenses and the speed of NFL is going to be absolutely critical to his success. So my whole point with that is that with their first round 1 pick 24, they went Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State, the offensive lineman, who I really liked. Solid pick for them. And if anything, will provide some really good depth and insurance for them on their offensive line when injuries do occur. Ty Felton, wide receiver, Maryland, round 3, pick 102. Wasn't really in love with that guy, but again, they seem to have some sneaky picks with some wide receivers and end up making them pretty good parts of the offense. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, the defensive lineman out of Georgia, round 5, pick 139. Kobe King, I know we talked about him pretty extensively, at least in our draft series, a linebacker out of Penn State with their round 6 pick. And then we did talk about this guy quite a bit. Gavin Bartholomew, the tight end out of Pittsburgh, with their last pick in round 6. So definitely not as much as many picks, I guess, or as many swings at the plate as possible. I believe they did lose that last year from trying to trade all the way up and getting their pass rusher. But either way, I think
And
that
McCarthy too. Yeah,
yeah,
they made a couple trades last year to move up in the first, and it hurt them in this year's draft.
yeah. But the one I really like on here the best is obviously Donovan Jackson. That, along with the free agency signings, I think they gave Kwesi a contract extension, right? So they obviously feel like he's doing something. He's doing something right, and has obviously built a really good, talented roster with really good coaching. So, yeah, I don't mind it at all. So,
Mm-hmm. Hey, look at their draft, and I feel like, unfortunately, like they did pack some good players into their 5 selections. I think Donovan Jackson was a little bit of a reach for me in the first round, but
yeah,
they're the typical Vikings media fashion, but they are really gassing him up so far. Like I mean, and it's not like we're not doing the same with like Golden or whatever, but they're anointing Donovan Jackson as like a Pro Bowl offensive line caliber player already. So they like what they see. At least they're trying to say they like what they see, but he probably will play a lot of guard, but he does have that tackle versatility. He stepped in for Josh Simmons
yeah.
and played really well at the end
Played
of last season when he
played
had to do that. You know, notable, Ty Felton was in for the Packers top 30, right? And I think a lot of people thought he'd maybe be a 4th or a 5th round pick. The Vikings clearly loved him, made him a 3rd round selection. So we'll see there. They have obviously done well with another Maryland wide receiver prospect at one point in time, and Stephon Diggs. And he actually had some Stephon Diggs body type comparisons, movement skills. So maybe they're hoping that they can strike gold twice there. And
yeah.
then you kind of mentioned King and Bartholomew, which are solid later picks. But we've kind of hit a lot of the guys they've lost, but they obviously Sam Darnold, Cam Robinson, Cameron Bynum, which however you feel about him, turned over the whole quarterback room basically, and Daniel Jones and Nick Mullins, who is I should know this. I should have looked it up. But who is the Vikings backup quarterback now? Who did they bring in to back up McCarthy? Yeah, so thinking about it, I think it's Sam Howell they brought in from the Commanders, who previously has starting experience there, but somebody who's not going to have a big outpouring probably from Vikings fans and community to try to take that job, even if McCarthy has like a couple hiccups early, right? So let's jump into the schedule. So the over under 8.5. If you kind of do a quick skim and go through, where do you see the Vikings getting some wins? Where do you see them taking some losses? Like, kind of where do you put things after you go through the Vikings schedule?
Man, it's looking, at least this middle part is looking pretty tough. Possibly against the Bears, Falcons, Steelers, and Browns. I think there's some good shots there. Bengals, maybe not so much. The Eagles, I don't think so. Chargers, I think are good. Lions, Ravens, Bears again. Packers, of course. Seahawks, maybe could be. Commanders, probably not. Dallas could be. Yeah. So I mean, like, I really like the Vegas line, the 8.5, 8 wins. I mean, it might be pretty realistic. But overall, I think it's a pretty tough schedule. And they again too have an early bye or an earlier bye in week 6, so they'll have to kind of deal with that in the back half of the second. But yeah,
They get that bye coming off of back-to-back international games, so they
there you
play
go.
the Steelers in Ireland, and then they basically, I'm assuming they'll fly to London and stay in practice there for the 4 or 5 days, and then they play the Browns in week 5, and then they have a bye week. So yeah, they do also have the disadvantage, like the Packers, of an early bye, but they're getting that after probably spending, about 2.5 weeks overseas, essentially. So
I
It
guess
won't be that long. It'll be maybe 2 weeks by the time they'll prepare. They'll fly out to Ireland, be there for a day of practice, stick around. So maybe 7 or 8 days. But, you kind of get acclimated to that environment after spending that much time over there.
that actually might be nice for them too. And you bring up a really good point too, the international games, which throws another whole sort of curveball in that. But then like, yeah, actually, two of them back to back. I guess that's nice. You'll be a little bit more acclimated, I guess, when you play the Browns, depending on when they get there. But then you have a bye. Ooh, and then guess what? Right out of that bye, man, here comes the gauntlet schedule. Eagles, Chargers, Lions, Ravens. Man, that's gonna be tough.
Look, typical Vikings luck, right? So the NFL did them a favor, I think, in giving them. I mean, and they did not do them any favors in giving them 2 international games. I mean, so
Right.
don't get me wrong there, but they gave them a chance against the Browns to get acclimated over there. But then they gave them the Eagles, the Ravens, the Commanders, and the Bengals all as home games. Like, that's an extremely favorable swing for the Minnesota Vikings, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I see that now. Right. Yeah. That's very lucky for sure.
I'm not saying they're going to win all those games, but having to face those premium opponents all at home, that has to be a slight bump in your favor, right? Vegas would say that's a 2.5 or a 3 point swing, right?
Percent. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yep.
So I look at this and, I'm going to just the gut feeling, and I did this with the Bears. I said they'd win 2, but I'm going to say the Vikings are going to win 3 divisional games. They always seem to give us a hard time. They seem to play the Lions hard too. We talked about the Bears last week. So there's 3. They got the Falcons at home. I think that's a win. So that's 4 wins. God, Bengals at home. That's kind of lucky. I'll give them a loss against the Bengals. I'll have them split the international games. So between the Steelers and the Browns, I'll have them split those. So we're at
Yeah.
5 wins. Lost to the Eagles in week 7. They go on the road against the Chargers. So I don't know. I just think they're not going to lose all these games, but that I have just a feeling they're going to win that game potentially. So that's 6 games. Loss against the Ravens, Seahawks, I feel like. So then we have the Bears, the Packers, the Seahawks. I feel like they might lose out west to the Seahawks, but then they have the Commanders at home. So I can give them, maybe I'll give them a 7th win there. Then they play the Cowboys and the Giants are the remaining 2 teams that are non-conference. So, give them, you could give them 1 or 2 wins there. So, I mean, you're right at 8 or 9 wins again. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push the over and hit the 9 wins. I'm going to give them wins against the Cowboys, wins against the Giants, and put them at 9 wins. I just think I unfortunately am jaded and just think that Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores are too good at what they do. So that kind of puts the Bears and the Vikings in this situation in a tie at 9 wins at the back end of the division, which I guess it'll come down to head to see how that shakes out. So I don't know. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I'm more in the 7 and 10, 8 and 9 range, but I can totally understand and justify your thinking. And really, to me, like I will completely raise my hand and admit it. If Kevin O'Connell does what he did with last year, with Sam Darnold, you can just anoint that man probably the best NFL head coach for sure. Like you just might as well just put that tag on him because if he does this again, you might want to sign him to a 10-year contract, Minnesota Vikings, because he is the best NFL coach. So really, I mean, I hear what you're saying. He is, and it really is, and it, man, part of me, really wants to and put the over on that, but I do think McCarthy's going to have some slumps this series. Kevin O'Connell's not. He's such a great coach, and totally understand that. But I don't think he can outrun mediocre talent. So I'll put them at 7 and 10 or 8 and 9 for this year.
I hope you're right, Rob. I would love to see a 7-win season from the Minnesota Vikings. And yeah, you're right. Kevin O'Connell pushes them to 9, 10 wins somehow again. I mean, I think that he takes over. He's on that mantle with Shanahan as, one of the top 2 or 3 coaches in the game currently, right? So they already had it. 7 wins from Rob, 9 wins from Jordan. That's what we'll call it right now for the Vikings win-loss projection. But yeah, we're going to close this one out. We just want to thank you for being here. We know that it's kind of the slow part of the season. So if you're sticking around, you're thinking about Packers football, you're listening to us, we truthfully appreciate it. We still have new episodes every Wednesday and Saturday right now. So please make sure to share this with any other football sickos who are still paying attention in June now. Make sure to give us a like, a subscribe, or follow on whatever platform you're listening to. And you can connect with us on X. Rob's at Sounds Gouda with 3 A's, and I'm at Olson George. So until next time, Packers Nation, have a Gouda morning, a Gouda afternoon, and a Gouda night. Go Pack Go.
Been wanted this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Okay. Hey.